What if I told you that the most glamorous and technologically advanced aircraft ever built was, in fact, one of the greatest commercial failures in aviation history, the Concorde? To many, it was more than a machine. It was a symbol, an icon of optimism, a promise that the future had arrived. It crossed the Atlantic in under 3.5 hours, flying faster than the Earth's rotation, allowing its passengers to arrive at their destination even before they had departed, local time. The roar of its 4 Rolls-Royce Snecma Olympus engines wasn't just power, it was poetry. For those on the ground, it was the sound of the future. For those on board, it was the soundtrack to an unparalleled privilege. But behind this facade of success and luxury, a story of political battles, nearly insurmountable engineering challenges, and a brutal economic reality was hidden, dooming it from the start. This aircraft, which represented the pinnacle of human ingenuity, became an anomaly, a white swan in a world of increasingly pragmatic and efficient commercial planes. Today, we will unveil the untold story of the Concorde, and you will understand why what seemed to be the greatest innovation in aviation paradoxically turned into its own death sentence. Passion for aviation knows no borders and connects enthusiasts from every corner of the planet. For our community to continue to grow and share these legendary stories, subscribe to the channel and comment below with the city where you are part. To our crew, we want to know how far our flight is reaching. To understand the Concorde, we need to go back to the 1950s and 60s, a time of unbridled optimism. Humanity was conquering space, technology was advancing by leaps and bounds, and commercial aviation was living its golden age. Air travel, once restricted to an elite, was beginning to become popular with the arrival of jets like the Boeing 707 and the Douglas DC-8. Flying was an event, not just transportation. Airlines competed in luxury, and service and technology seemed to have no limits. In this scenario, the next logical frontier was speed. If it was possible to cross the Atlantic in 8 hours, why not in 3? The idea of a supersonic passenger transport, SST, was not just an engineer's dream but a matter of national prestige. The Soviet Union, with its Tupolev Tu-144, and the United States, with Boeing's 2707 project, were in a fierce race. For France and the United Kingdom, 2 European powers still recovering from the post-war era and seeing their global influence wane, the SST project was more than a technological bet. It was a political statement. It was a way of telling the world that Europe still led in innovation and sophistication. In 1962, the British and French governments signed a treaty that would unite their largest aerospace companies, the British Aircraft Corporation and SUD Aviation, in one of the most ambitious and expensive projects in history. The promise was clear: to create an airplane that would not only break the sound barrier, but also redefine the concept of luxury travel, connecting Paris and London to New York in record time. It was the birth of a legend. The problem is that physics does not bend to political ambitions. From the beginning, the Concorde faced an invisible but deafening enemy, the sonic boom. When an aircraft breaks the sound barrier, it creates a shock wave that travels to the ground, generating a loud and disruptive bang, similar to thunder. The engineers knew this, but the magnitude of the problem was underestimated. During test flights, the Concorde's shock wave was not just a noise, it was a physical force capable of shattering windows and startling livestock. This generated a wave of environmental protests and strong public resistance, especially in the United States, the most crucial market for the success of any commercial aircraft. The American Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, under immense popular and lobbyist pressure, banned supersonic flights over the continental United States. This decision alone was a nearly fatal blow. Suddenly, the Concorde was restricted to routes over the ocean, drastically limiting its potential market. The more than 100 initial orders from airlines around the world, such as Pan Am and TWA, began to evaporate. What was meant to be a global aircraft became a niche aircraft. And this brings us to the second major conflict, the economy. The 1973 oil crisis caused fuel prices to soar. The Concorde, with its 4 thirsty engines and its need for afterburners to reach supersonic speed, consumed a colossal amount of kerosene, burning up to 4 times more fuel than a Boeing 747 on a comparable route. The economic equation became unsustainable. Let's delve deeper into the secrets that sealed the Concorde's fate. First, the cost. The project, initially budgeted at $70 million, ended up costing over $1.3 billion, an overrun of almost 2,000%. The British and French governments, trapped in an agreement that had no easy exit clause, continued to pump public money into a project that was already proving to be economically unviable. Only 20 aircraft were ever built, and 14 of them were basically handed over to the state-owned airlines, British Airways and Air France, at a symbolic price. In essence, the taxpayer funded the plane so that it could fly. Another little discussed secret was its operational complexity. The Concorde was an engineering marvel, but also a maintenance nightmare. Its aluminum fuselage expanded by up to 30 centimeters, about a foot, in flight due to the heat generated by air friction at Mach 2, with the tip of the nose reaching 127 degree, 260 degree hours. This required constant and extremely expensive structural inspections. And here is a revelation many do not know. The Concorde flew at such a high altitude, around 60,000 feet, that the crew and passengers were more exposed to cosmic radiation. There was a radiation meter in the cockpit, and the standard procedure was to descend to lower altitudes if the levels became dangerous. It wasn't just a technical decision, it was a strategic move that, unfortunately, proved unsustainable in the real world. But behind the billion-dollar figures and technical challenges, there was the human factor. The Concorde was an aircraft that inspired immense pride. For the engineers who dedicated their careers to it, it was the materialization of a dream. They overcame challenges that seemed impossible, creating a droop-nose system to improve pilot visibility and a delta wing that was an aerodynamic sculpture. For the pilots, flying the Concorde was the pinnacle of a career. They were not just pilots, they were an elite. They described the experience of seeing the curvature of the earth and the sky darkening to a deep indigo blue as something almost spiritual. And for the passengers, it was the experience of a lifetime. In those days, flying was an event, and the Concorde was the main event. On board, the service was impeccable, with champagne and lobster. Each passenger received a certificate proving they had broken the sound barrier. This human dimension, this pride and passion, is what kept the Concorde flying for 27 years, even when economic logic screamed otherwise. It was a heritage of human ingenuity, and both British Airways and Air France knew its value went beyond the balance sheet. It was a powerful marketing tool and a symbol of national prestige. For nearly 3 decades, the Concorde maintained an impeccable safety record, but on July 25, 2000, everything changed. Air France Flight 4590, taking off from Paris, ran over a small metal strip left on the runway by a DC-10 that had departed minutes earlier. A tire on the Concorde exploded, and a piece of rubber struck the underside of the wing at high speed, rupturing a fuel tank. The leaking fuel ignited, and the plane turned into a fireball. The crash, which killed all 109 people on board and 4 on the ground, shocked the world. The iconic image of the Concorde with a tail of fire became a tragic symbol. The fleets were immediately grounded. Investigations led to expensive modifications. The Concorde returned to the skies in 2001, but the world was no longer the same. The September 11th attacks had shaken confidence in air travel, and the industry entered a deep crisis. The demand for luxury travel plummeted. Airbus, which had inherited the Concorde's maintenance, announced that support costs would become prohibitive. Faced with a scenario of low demand, rising costs, and the indelible stain of the accident, Air France and British Airways made the inevitable decision. In 2003, the last Concorde flight landed, ending the era of commercial supersonic travel forever. The dream was over. Every iconic aircraft has secrets and stories that deserve to be told. Our mission here on the channel is to ensure that this legacy is not lost to time. If you want to continue discovering the behind the scenes of engineering, strategic decisions, and the emotions that shaped the golden age of aviation, subscribe so you don't miss our next documentary. So, was the Concorde a failure? If we look only at the numbers, yes, it was a commercial disaster that never recouped its investment and only sold to the airlines that were forced to buy it by their governments. But its legacy is much more complex. The Concorde was a technological catalyst. It drove advances in aerodynamics, metallurgy, and flight control systems that benefited all the planes that came after it. It was the first commercial aircraft to use analog fly-by-wire controls, precursors to the digital systems that are now standard at Airbus. Its carbon brakes, developed to withstand high landing speeds, are now common on commercial aircraft. Paradoxically, the Concorde taught us a crucial lesson about aviation. Innovation for innovation's sake is not sustainable. The future of aviation was not in speed at any cost, but in efficiency, fuel economy, and the ability to carry more people for less money. The Boeing 747, its contemporary, followed that path and thrived for decades. The Concorde was an aircraft ahead of its time and at the same time a victim of it. It represents the pinnacle of an era of optimism, where engineering and design could triumph over economics. Today we live in a world where flying feels more like riding a bus. It's efficient, it's safe, but it has lost the magic. The Concorde may have disappeared from our skies, but its soul, its audacity, and its timeless design still fly on, as a glorious reminder of a time when we dared to dream bigger and fly faster. The Concorde was more than a plane. It was a heritage of humanity, a flying sculpture that challenged the limits of the possible. It reminds us that behind the cost spreadsheets and market pressures, aviation is also made of passion, pride, and human dreams. It represents the loss of a certain audacity, the transition from a golden age to an age of pragmatism. The roar of its engines no longer echoes over the Atlantic, but its legend continues to inspire all of us who look to the skies and feel the nostalgia for a future that almost was. It was a glorious failure, a magnificent miscalculation, and perhaps that is why we love it so much. Now, I want to hear from you. Did you ever have the chance to see the Concorde fly? Perhaps you were one of the lucky ones to fly in it. What is your memory or feeling about this icon of aviation? Leave your comment below. We want to hear your story.